Recording to the cloud.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, I will give an abbreviated summary. TLDR, Code of Conduct, please follow it. Retro Part 2, love y'all. Halfway through the doc, let's finish the doc. Great. Thank you, Tim, for the record button. So we left off kind of in the middle of a couple of Adolfo's entries. So we are in the middle of the what could have gone better section of 119. Adolfo, could you take it away? And Tim, I believe you have your hand raised for once he is done.
Yeah, we were discussing about, well, considering if maybe we should modify the information embargo or maybe scrap it all together. I think, Tim, you had something to say about that.
Yeah, so the embargo word, I think, is a word that carries maybe a little more weight than is intended here. So from our perspective, inside the Kubernetes project, all of this stuff is public. Anybody who wants to know it can know it. It's completely transparent. The information is sourced from GitHub. We're having these public meetings. We're discussing it. We're putting it into draft documents. We can and should coordinate very closely together. We're not, the embargo word doesn't prevent us from working together. This comms embargo is distinct in that sense from, say, a security embargo for a critical vulnerability. The comms embargo is a term that comes from marketing. In the marketing world, you have something that you're going to publish and it's put under embargo, sometimes because it is actually truly secret, but in the sense here, it's really just about coordinating the date with, or the timestamp, the time at which people start publishing things. So the idea here is that when we use the word embargo, people in marketing or PR or that type of a field, they hear, oh, I'm not allowed to publish my blog post yet, or I'm not allowed to put this news article up. So they get it all drafted, it's in their content management system, and they're ready to click publish, but they're not allowed to click publish until the embargo lifts. And then everybody does it at the same time. Not everybody adheres to this embargo because this stuff is public. So you will see some media sources that describe the Kubernetes release before it is released. Those are people who are not participating in the process. But it exists for a reason. It's a coordination reason outside of the team. It's the point that everybody knows that they can go. And by using the word embargo, it's important because it lets them know that they're really supposed to not do it yet. So I think we should keep it, but I think we should understand what it means inside the team, and everything that was proposed here for intra-team coordination is awesome and we should definitely do.
So maybe, I don't know whose job it is to decide this, but we could, because one of the things that happened during this release was that the SIG leads were asking us to show them the major themes document. Then at some point, I think it was Jordan that asked me to set editing and viewing rights to the document to the whole, I think it was the whole Kubernetes dev group. And then someone, I think it was Sasha, that pointed out that there was a consent embargo, and then we switched it to closed again. So I think we should, if we're going to improve on some tooling to do this, and I think we should have a clear set of way of understanding who has access to it, or maybe we can just develop not publish the document like in the finished document, but maybe the files that will be part of it, or I don't know, something like that.
I think we could do a couple things. I'd be curious to go back and look at past ones. I suspect we didn't have them shared with Kubernetes dev fully, but also I don't think that would be a bad thing to do. We would want to have some sort of header at the top that says, this is draft material, it is not complete, it is embargoed to the press and media until some time. I do think probably in the past, if we look at the docs, they were probably shared with the milestone maintainers, which is a pretty broad list of people. So that might be something that's more narrow than Kubernetes Dev, but still gives the people who are going to want to give input the ability to view it. But we could look at that.
So yeah, so just a note there, the Kubernetes milestone maintainer group has been archived, so we'd have to look at an alternate group for that. Specifically the email list, not the GitHub team. But yeah, I agree that like this is all public information. We should, whoever wants to access it, even if we gave permission to Kubernetes Dev, whoever was on Kubernetes Dev would then have access to it. So I think it's more so coordination between us and SIGs throughout the cycle, making sure that that information is in early. The point that I was making towards the end of the part one was not so much to get rid of the embargo altogether. It was just we need to put a fine point on when we consider the embargo to have been lifted. Right now, the embargo is U.S. specific centric. That's what that time has been in the past, and I don't believe we need to do that anymore. So I think that we should say at the point which the release is released, whatever that means, right? If it's for different teams, it means different things. So I think that if we say the point at which our blog goes live is the point at which the embargo is lifted for external consumers, right? And if that's before the 5 p.m. EST, 5 p.m. PST, that I think going sooner is helpful to them because, like, I know at least internally, people are waiting, like kind of waiting on my go. Like, yes, it's happening right now. It's okay. It's going. It's gone. You can do it now. If we have a little bit more clarification between it's either this time or the time that the Kubernetes blog is released, whichever one is earlier.
Yeah, I think was just well, my intention was to raise the point that we need to, if we're going to improve on the tooling and find a new process, just to maybe we can discuss the actual implementation of it during the next SIG release meeting. So just to let know that there's the overlap and also that difficulty of improving the tooling because of the embargo. But we can discuss it further down the road.
On the specifics of the time, the intent there is not to have it be specific to anywhere, but it is about giving an indication of when the release is expected to happen. It's hard for us to know that because we always have surprises, but if you imagine there's 100 people out there in the press and media who are waiting to press publish on their content management system, they need some sort of an alarm, a calendar reminder, somebody needs to be awake watching to do that. So they look for the guidance of when it's expected. And that's also part of why we've tried to make a call 1 or 2 days before if we're clear that we're going to be slipping, so that we can propagate the information out to those people so they know to be watching for whatever the next target time frame is. But it's really about that time, giving a time frame, and it should be documented in multiple time zones, UTC, whatever, so that people everywhere can understand it, because it's definitely not US centric.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else on that topic? Otherwise, Adolfo, you have the next one as well.
Adolfo, if you don't mind dropping a note for future topics in the SIG release agenda, so we can pick that one up.
Sure, I'll do it for the next one. All right, so regarding the next topic, so as many of you here know, we did a lot of automation during the 119 and 119 cycles to improve the release notes process. And especially during the 119 cycle, most of the job was already automated. And I think the release notes team had less than a spectacular time shadowing for the cycle. Two of my members are here. I don't know if you want to comment on that. Basically, what we were doing was just waiting for the next release to cut and waiting for us to run the command, which just was waiting 3 minutes for the process to run, and that was it. And attending, just saying green, green, green on the meetings, so I think, well, we were pitching some ideas which are further down the document on a new process for the release notes team to implement. So I just wanted to say the intro, and one went bad because we had a lot of manpower wasted during the cycle, and but we luckily have a new way of making the best use of our team's time, which we'll discuss further down.
All right. Anyone to add to that? If either of the shadows want to speak up on it.
I have comments, but I'll wait for the shadows to go.
All right, Stephen, I think you can go.
You sure, shadows? All right. So the goal, my maybe not so secret goal that we say every now and again a few cycles, is that the release team should eventually go away. Right? Like one day in the future, enough of these things are automated, and we have people who are consistently looking over status. Maybe it's not a full team, right? We've done this in the past with the test infra role. The test infra role was completely automated away. The branch managers and patch release team have been moved to a separate team, a separate org, right? They're in their own sub project now, and they operate kind of outside of the scope of any one release cycle, right? So, so I don't think that the people power was necessarily wasted. I think that it was redirected into more automation, which is awesome, right? A lot of the stuff that you've written up, Adolfo, and worked on throughout the cycle brings us to taking more and more of the human effort out of the process, right? So I think that that's a huge win. In terms of like day-to-day operations, what I would say to release team members in general is like, if you have nothing to do, like let us know, because there are so many things to do. Like we can give you work. So I would say, like, going into every assignment that you pick up, be super vocal about if you're not feeling fulfilled, or you could take on more work and are interested in doing that. We are happy to dig things up for you to work on. But overall, I think that this is the right direction that we should see release notes moving in, and in general, every role, right? If enhancements, we're building a tool and we're getting rid of the spreadsheets, release notes, we're refactoring the process so that it runs on a website and it's all automated, and proud jobs are running and doing most of the work. Like, that's awesome, right? So continue thinking of ways that we can eliminate the human toil from the process. And again, if you need work to do, let us know.
Yeah, there's a bunch in release engineering that's somewhat related, so there's still plenty to do.
All right, so I guess we can go with the specifics during the what can be improved topic.
Sounds
random question. Was there a mid-release survey or something of the sort?
I did not see one happen.
This cycle we did do a survey at the beginning, but so it ended up being the beginning. It was what would have been roughly the mid. So this cycle was unusual in timing. Yeah, we had a number of things in sort of the May timeframe, if I recall correctly. As emeritus lead, I had a couple of meetings with all the shadows, and then we'd also done a survey.
Okay. I was just asking to see if there was another check in place to get a feel for how people are feeling about the work that they are doing or possibly not doing.
Yep. Is Lockie on? Lockie and I had
Yeah.
started to
Don't see
chat
him.
last week about recircling back to that as we start up in the current part of the emeritus advisor handover. Yep.
Yeah, it's actually the whole 120 leads group has been talking about it as well. If you have comments and suggestions, please share them.
Are we still planning to do the exit surveys?
Yep. I think that's drafted and maybe went out. Has anybody seen it? Able to confirm? I'll check with Lockie and see.
All right. I think that topic is done. Next up is Daniel, communication between CI signal.
Hey folks, so there's a few things in this block of text mentioned here, but it mostly revolves around CI signal communication with the different SIGs. So generally with CI signal, we're monitoring the jobs and tests. We see something is not green and we investigate. We try to tie that to the correct SIG to, ask them to help us fix it or to get them to fix it. And that can have varying levels of success. Everything mentioned here is not necessarily specific to 1.19, but it manifested in 1.19 just like I've seen it do in previous releases. So I think it's an important thing to bring up and make sure we're addressing. So first of all, just communicating with SIGs. The primary way to do that is create an issue and tag folks on it. That actually got a little bit better this release, I think, because of some of the ways we handled milestones and the burn down on the 1.19 milestone on those issues was a little more aggressive than I've seen in previous releases, which I think helped with that because it wasn't just the CI signal folks pinging SIGs, it was everyone from all angles. That was great at the end of the release, but ideally we don't get to the end of the release and have to do that. So the motivation for SIGs is typically, us creating an issue and then finding the appropriate people in Slack who we know to be responsive from our anecdotal experience, and then pinging them a bunch of times, basically annoying them until they take action, which is fine. That's kind of like what we sign up for, but it's not very efficient, right? And it's not a really enjoyable experience for the SIG either. And also it takes a significant amount of effort for CI signal members, especially those who are newer to the release process, to determine how to contact the appropriate person. So we'd see a lot that, someone who is newer to the Kubernetes project would have trouble finding, the right person in a SIG to make sure action takes place, which you really shouldn't have to do, right? There should be a funnel where you can put the information in and the SIG pulls it off the bus and does what they need to. So we'd like to improve that process. And part of that is motivating SIGs to keep their tests at a certain threshold and identifying what belongs to who. So part of that effort is things we're already doing, like making sure that there's contact information on all jobs and tests. And so that it's easier to triage who's responsible for a test failure or flake. But it's still, there's a lot of work to be done there, and there's not really established thresholds for saying like this SIG is doing what it needs to do or it's not doing what it needs to do, because there's no measuring stick. So I think that's something that was difficult, right? Because any sort of like this SIG is doing a good job or they're not is all anecdotal from CI signal or from other folks who are, hitting retest a bunch of times on their PR. So I think that's something that we can work on. Another thing that gets brought up pretty frequently, which I've seen it from kind of different parties within the community, for a lot of folks who I guess consumed the CI signal reports, which haven't been going out for 2 releases now, I believe. I've heard, them ask, why isn't this going out? From a SIG perspective, the folks that are actually usually fixing the things, I haven't heard much pushback on it. One of the reasons why the CI signal report doesn't give a great picture is just because, just similar to our release meetings, we're generally giving a point in time update which is not really reflective, especially for flaky tests, of the health of the project. So I know, at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m., whenever we'd have the meeting every day, I was always praying that, it would turn green like right before. And it's like, all right, we're looking good. Like, let's go. And obviously that's not helpful at all. So what we'd like to do is be able to show trends, be able to show, healthiness over time. And Test Grid gives us a little bit of that. But there's the disparate thing of Test Grid showing us, how this job has been performing over time, and then tying that to tests, and then tying that to issues, and then tying that to PRs, et cetera. So there's potentially some tooling that could go on there. And a lot of the reason why I think tooling hasn't existed here and some of these problems have persisted is that, we've typically had turnover in this area from release to release, just like with other release teams. But I'm optimistic that with the bootstrapping of the CI Signal subproject, that some of these things can, well, first of all, some of this domain knowledge can kind of be transferred more quickly to new folks who are coming in. And there's kind of like people there to guide new people along and help them out to be contributing useful things faster. And also, if there is tooling that needs to be created, that there's a place for that to live and that there's people to maintain that over time, right? Because a lot of the pushback on adding new tooling is, are you going to build this thing and then leave? Which, places a maintenance burden on someone who's not familiar with how to manage something. So I think that will go a long way in doing that. And the other aspect of that is establishing actual kind of like benchmarks that SIGs need to meet for us to say, like you're managing your tests well, right? And we need a way to measure that. We need a way to present that. And, there needs to be incentive for people to respond and make sure their tests are healthy and be monitoring them and make sure they're testing the right thing, which is, a whole different thing outside of just CI Signal saying this test is failing or it's flaking. Are we even testing the right thing? And that's even harder for someone on CI Signal to get insight into. That's where we have to rely on SIGs even more. So that was a bit of a brain dump there, but I think there's a lot of work that can be done. And I'm optimistic that having something that spans releases is going to go a long way in helping.
That was a lot to take in. Thank you, Daniel. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Typically, when I hear spans multiple releases, I look at Tim and Steven, unfortunately. Or fortunately, kind of depends on your perspective.
Yes. Yeah, so we have been, I think that the work that has happened over, the 119 cycle, everyone who jumped in for CI Signal improvements across release and testing, it's been really phenomenal to see that pop up. I think that I forgot which cycle, maybe it was 117 or so, that it was kind of determined that maybe the CI Signal reports were not useful, and I believe that's why they stopped going out. But overall, we're hearing that communication is a big thing, and given the change in frequency to the community meeting, and there were a few misses that we plan to shore up for 120. I'm excited about seeing the CI Signal project sub-project kick off. We're going to be working on that first thing for 120, and we already have the sub-project owners lined up. So thank you to everyone who's getting involved. There's also discussion and a proposal out for a working group for reliability, and part of one of their long-term goals is to establish essentially gating for the for tests that are related to certain SIGs, right? So I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but essentially being able to block changes to certain areas if the signal looks a certain way. So that's in discussion. I can dig up their proposal unless someone beats me to it. Overall, I think we're moving in the right direction. We just have to keep the foot on the pedal.
All right. Anyone else have anything on that?
Yeah, I just add that I'm happy to span multiple releases in CI Signal. It's not a waypoint for me. It's where I want to be.
Awesome.
Yay!
Then with that, we are done with what we think went poorly in 120 or 119, and we are going to move on to what we will do differently in 120 and beyond. Josh has the first one, but I don't think Josh is on. Taylor, do you want to read that, or should I read it?
I would say I would love some help in reading that. Just forgive me, I'm in between a couple of things.
Yep.
I know that the gist of that is really just around communication. You know, just kind of pointing back to that, and then trying to find ways that we can be a little bit better at informing the community. You know, obviously being a distributed team that's working asynchronously, that's very difficult. And then what kind of modes of communication can we identify that will be helpful for the community and allow for people to really engage and feel influenced on that front. I think that's the gist of what Josh is saying there, if I'm not mistaken.
You nailed it, so you kind of more or less covered it. I'll still go over it though. Consider having the communication role or maybe enhancements be in charge of in-community communications such as the weekly reports as well as external communications. This would have the added benefit of giving that team activity during the early phases of the release. Taylor, you mentioned what would the thoughts be around surfacing the release schedule on the Kubernetes website to increase visibility and maybe even utilizing RSS for updates. Max, don't see Max on.
Max is on.
Oh, then I'm blind, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Max.
Well, yeah, I mean, I drove in the last releases row and see this, but also in the aftermath of the release, some communication about that this is needed and potentially needed to facilitate the whole communication and give a regular update. It's somehow move a little bit back into the background of the role of comms, focusing pretty much just on this blogging stuff, which I think should be just more relevant in the end of the whole release cycle. And really gives this flavor of doing communication actively, put their really heavy weight onto this.
So, yeah, so given some of the feedback both in this cycle and last, I think we have some opportunities here between the enhancements team and release notes and communications to get together and talk about major themes, talk about enhancements incoming, talk about what communication looks like overall for the community. From the quote unquote top level, I would plan to have at least biweekly comms coming out from SIG Release that would include updates from all of the sub projects, right? So things you want to know, like how the next dev release is coming, how the upcoming cherry pick deadlines, the plans for next patch release cycles, cool tools that we've written recently. I think there has been a lot of good work from the SIG that we have not shown off as much as we could, and I'd like to make sure that we're doing that not just for the release team but from a little bit of everybody. So I think that if you look at some orgs where where leaders may send a a Monday morning email or something like that, what usually happens is Friday or Thursday, they have all of their sub-project owners essentially send in updates, right? So maybe we can do something like that, where sub-project owners can kind of take a tally of what's going on, and we can send out updates that kind of encompass the entire scope of the SIG. If that sounds good to people.
Yeah, I think it maybe also matches together with the idea to further develop in an active communications calendar, So to give really specific point in time where we have to send the communication. So even though if we, for example, do not have an update in 1 or 2 weeks, but that you have at certain point in time always to potentially summarize a whole period and give again a status for this past weeks to it.
Yeah, and I think this goes beyond a maybe internal comms calendar. This is if there are important dates that we need to publicize, they should be on our main calendar, the one that we show for the release, right? So if it's a if it's a date that is highlighted in bold or something like that, right? And the activity is like, hey, it's the it's code freeze, or hey, it's whatever milestone, right? It's that also includes some communication from the team, right? And the communication can probably be centered or handled by whoever is on point for that specific area, right? So enhancements freeze, enhancements should be working on it. Release notes, they need major themes, they'll be working on that. And I think that the communications lead can probably work to make sure that that is happening.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Next up, Adolfo, back to the release notes ideas.
Yeah, so as we were saying, we will have during several chats during the cycle between Sasha and I, we were thinking of a new way to have the team be able to work during the whole cycle on the release notes. So the way I see it, the release notes have a very, especially from a shadowing perspective, have a very good potential of showing of showing the whole of the Kubernetes code base and changes to the shadows. At least that was my expectation when I first signed up. But unfortunately, the whole editing at the end of the cycle just makes it impossible to fully go into any kind of depth into doing a thorough review of the notes. So what we did was think on a new way to have the notes edited during the whole cycle, and wrote some tool to do that. The current 119 notes were done with this tool, so they're mostly done. And the way it works is that the new additions to Krell will present the user with every note, every new note that comes along. When a new contributor files a new PR and Krell detects the new release note, it will present the release team with the new release note for them to review. And if they accept the note as it is, it gets logged, and if they don't, they have the chance to edit the content right from the start. And this is all stored in the release directory inside of SIG Release. And so this gives a chance to the release team to bring any doubts or questions during the release meetings to the whole release team for them to review. I've written a more clear, I think, document detailing the process, which I've linked in the document for everyone to review. And just wanted to hear everyone's thoughts on that whenever you get a chance to read it.
Awesome. If no one has any other comments, we can move on. I want to try and get us. Here, Stephen.
So in working on these tools, I think what's kind of cool is that we're seeing some of the same patterns emerge, right? If you think of the KEP-CTL that a few of you on the call are thinking about and working on for the enhancement side, we started to talk about what the personas look like for these various tools, right? We have kind of like this intra-team persona where I might want to make sure certain metadata looks good, right? Or, you know, or you take the reviewer approver persona, you've got also the passerby persona who may just want to see what these things look like, right? So, you know, for the passerby, you've got the release notes website, right? And for a day-to-day editor who may be on the release team, you've got one view, right? So it's so just starting to think about the functionality that could hold for someone who is actively doing the work, but also someone who is in a SIG, maybe a milestone maintainer, reviewer, approver that may want to edit notes on site, because it would be great to shard that work more towards the SIGs. The goal is hopefully to have less work be done on the release note side. Going back to the previous point, right? Create a great tool, enable everyone in the community to use it.
So if I understand correctly, what you're suggesting is that we think on ways of shifting those reviews of the content back to the SIGs?
Right. So, so what we have discussed with KEPCTL is being able to filter down to SIG, right? So, say I want to review release notes that live. I want to review release notes or KEPs or something that are for my SIG specifically, right? Maybe I want to edit the content of the release notes. How does that flow potentially work? Can I edit the release notes in such a way that it will generate a PR that I can post somewhere? Will the content potentially, given I provide a GitHub access token, can I then, assuming I have the appropriate rights on the repo, edit the release notes that are actually on the PRs, right? So future generation is always correct, right? So that, like, making sure that all of the various content streams that we're getting from like start to eliminate the human requirement around it, right? If we have constant editors that are pushing accurate data to the right places, then there's less cleanup for you to do at the end of the cycle.
All right. Yes, I think the way it's built currently, we can think on ways of incorporating that, but we'll think about it during the next couple of weeks.
Cool. And that's for sure future plans. It's not a now, necessarily a now thing.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Sweet. Okay. Next up, actually, I think the next two are on Laurie.
Hi. So basically, there's a couple others further below, but the first one I've listed here is just setting up a regular triage and workflow process. So we started laying the groundwork for this, done some project board cleanup, went through a lot of items in the existing project boards to check in with them and see if they're still priorities or not. We're also looking at ways to consolidate related items into themes so that we can gain more control over some of the goals that we've established over time, and bring these different items together for to get more well-rounded understanding. So ideally we continue with this work. So I'm planning to help drive this, if not just drive this work. But many of you are already helping out with that. One suggestion is to walk the project boards regularly in the meetings that we have to ensure that we review work in progress, address blocked issues, and refresh and close old items. There is a challenge here in that we seem to run out of time during the meetings. So I'm talking to some folks here about how we might reformat some of the meetings to gain more space and time for that board blocking effort. And then also we can always try out the asynchronous approach as well. One tool we would like to try out that to supplement the project boards is Triage Party. I've included the link here. Many of you have probably seen it already. It's a multiplayer triage board set up by Thomas Stromberg, and it's in use in Minikube and Scaffold and a couple other projects. So we have we have a setup for SIG release, and now it just needs to be populated with rules that speak to our prioritization goals. So how long do we want to let issues sit without a response, or how long would we be comfortable letting a pull request sit in our backlog without a merge? I've prototyped what the SIG release triage party can look like, and I've included the link here for your review. But basically, it spells out some of those roles. I haven't put those SLAs in my suggestions, so that's up for debate. But essentially, once we figure out a consensus on how long our delays, our SLAs would be, then we can start setting up that triage party board, I think, unless anybody knows something or objects. Knows something that I don't or objects to that plan, I should say.
Plus 100 for me.
Okay. Do you think, is this the right forum to set up an ETA, or like?
No,
Yeah.
only because it's the retro.
Mhm.
But this is the right meeting for it.
Yep.
I think that we have multiple problems that we've already kind of discussed in various conversations. There's, I would like to see triage, us have the capability to do triage asynchronously, and have the meetings as when we need to do triage in meetings as well, right? Only because we have such an enormous backlog of things to do. And a lot of them are, the trickier part is a lot of the long-standing issues are big. They're very big. They're multi-cycle projects, some of them, and some of them have, some of them have made a decent amount of progress. I think that's one we need to establish triage. So like Tim said, plus 100 to moving that forward. We also need to get out of the game as the SIG of triaging other people's issues. That's a big portion of it. We need to make it easy. So acting as guinea pigs for triage party, I think we should be working towards also establishing potential triage patterns, right? Just in general, and things that can be mimicked by other SIGs. Lori, I know you're already doing work on that, and had a chat with like Node and Network about.
Yeah, that's further down.
Yeah. So I think we're on the right path. I think from the perspective of the chairs and technical leads, and Lori, of course, it's going to be our job to break down a lot of the chunkier issues into things that are more digestible. I think that a lot of the things that have not had movement is because they're just really large and we run out of time to think through all of that stuff. So we definitely want to get more hands on deck. I think that having a clearer idea of what you should be working on, so just overall prioritization and what I think that, throughout a release cycle, we spend a lot of time thinking about what major themes are for a release, but maybe not the SIG specifically. So there are things that I kind of drive towards and Tim drives towards, and now that we have more people on the crew, we can have more people driving towards that. But we should be able to put up kind of what the roadmap looks like for the SIG and what our major themes are personally, as we move into the next few cycles.
Yeah, I cover that further below as well in the different points. But basically, if you would like to know anything more about triaging and what we're doing on this front, please get in touch, because it will, if we really get this going, we'll find that we touch base on our workload a lot faster. We'll gain a better understanding and more control over it. And it will help spread knowledge incrementally, because it leads, when we talk about these issues, it leads to discussions about them, which means that we end up communicating more regularly about what we're trying to do. And that's helpful as a team.
George, I think you have your hand raised.
Yes, quick question. And I don't know if this has any deep and philosophical answer, but during the release team meetings, at least the Monday one or the main one, whichever way you want to think about it, there used to be at the end of it, people used to do some triaging of the project boards, and I don't think that's done anymore. Is there a deep philosophical question for that, or?
Or a specific reason behind it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Primarily, time really is
Mhm.
what it comes down to. So, going over, I think it was deemed to not be useful to go over the same things over and over and expect progress updates, right? So I think part of it is also the team is very focused on executing on what's detailed in their handbooks, as opposed to stuff that is listed as maybe assigned to the team for the cycle. I think that we need to and we can do better on that moving forward.
Yeah, if things aren't moving forward, that's usually a sign they're too big to be completed in any reasonable amount of time for the time constraints that you're working with. So but we'll have to dig further, as Stephen was mentioning.
All right.
Yeah,
We have.
I think.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I think one of the biggest drop-offs that we have is the transition from cycle to cycle. As we rotate in an entirely new team, we have a bunch of assignees on topics that may not be working in our area anymore. So it's important to figure out how we handle that handoff and how we do that quickly, so that we can get the next team focused on it if people don't want to continue working on those issues. I think that's the bulk of the release team issues that are outstanding.
Yeah. Cool.
So
Which
we
goes,
have. I was going to say we have less than 10 minutes. So
I can run through all of mine really briefly, and then get them out of the way.
let's do it.
Cool. All right. So the next item is setting up a leads monthly sync to drive more collaboration, teaminess, and knowledge exchange around strategy and also workload. This is done. I sent out the invites today. This kind of aligns with the point about the Emeritus Advisor, and that it's a way for us to build more culture into the release team, and for that person, Lockie, to hear what all the leads are saying and what they're struggling with, et cetera, to be able to help them. So look in your inbox for the invite. And then learning about other SIG's workflows to help the release team get ahead of issues and help ourselves. So this goes to Stephen's point about not triaging for others. So I'm looking for ways to do that. And one of the things I did last week was to reach out to all SIGs to see if they're doing the feature health check a la SIG node, which I have linked their feature health check doc here. If you can't access it, let me know. I have a screenshot of it. But basically, this is what is coming down the pipeline for 120. What are SIGs planning to do? If we can get ahead of questions like that, puts us in a better position to understand what we're going to face further in the cycle as the cycle progresses. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. But I've heard from most of the SIGs at this point about their process around understanding which enhancements they're going to push in in 120 at least. And then continuing to structure and package work to highlight high value, high impact efforts, creating user stories and short roadmap like docs. This is with the intent of understanding, like having a plan, not planning waterfall like all the way through, but what do we know today would be really high impact so that we can unblock ourselves or get long-standing items done and be able to move to the next item. So I gave an example here. Some of you have already seen this doc. It's 6 user stories based on old retro items and things in the backlog for the release team that you all helped prioritize over the summer. And I think that's it.
You crushed it. Thank you.
I've had to facilitate meetings, so I support.
We're good. Does anyone have any comments on any of those 3? We only have one left, so I'm okay with that. All right. The last one is on you, Taylor. If you are still in between things, I can read. Otherwise, it's on you.
No, I'm back at home, not on the road. So not dodging traffic. So this is kind of in line with what Stephen had said about, just let's get things automated. Let's try to make this each release the best one we could possibly do with the tools that we have. This is around creating more tooling. And, there were a couple opportunities identified during this release cycle, like, hey, we might be able to automate calendar invites and kind of getting, just overall administration. Basically, let's get rid of the things that don't make sense to have the release team focus on, just because it's either toil or just there's a better way to do it. And so in 120, I think it'd be helpful for us to identify those efforts and then to kind of start creating more tooling around that. I know we'd already said that, but this is just another nod in that direction until we all join the singularity and become cyborgs. Still need some help on that front.
All right, that went 0 to 100 real fast. Stephen, if you're trying to automate out my life, I am going to have some problems with that, but, I have faith that, I don't know, I will become Borg. Okay, we are at the bottom. Does anyone have anything else they would like to add or talk about? We do have 5 minutes left. Thank you, Lori, for absolutely blitzing your 3 entries.
Resistance is futile.
All right. If no one else has anything other than some Borg quotes, thank you all for doing another wonderful retro. Thank you for having me. I love helping out. And may 120 be the best release yet.
Thank you, everybody. Adios.
Thank you.